Hey everyone, welcome to week 2 of Clear the Way. This is Deb Kern, and I'm so happy that you've made it this far. I hope you've been enjoying all the experiences so far, the recipes, the smoothies, the yoga. So this week, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is the relationship between sugar and stress, because by now, because you're starting to dose out your meals, you're paying attention, making sure that you're at least having your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And many of you are having snacks also. And that really depends on, your hunger level and keeping your cravings at bay. So most people really do better with a little snack, as you have seen recommended to you. And that has everything to do with sugar and stress. So I just really want to use this. I'm going to go pretty quickly because I know you have a lot of things you're soaking up in this program. But this is such important information, I want to give it to you. So let's just start with the most important thing. The most important thing is that stable blood sugar is the answer. So many people find themselves caught on this wheel of being stressed and grabbing foods that have a high glycemic impact, and then that creates more stress, and they grab more of that food, and it just goes on and on. And really, the answer is to have a stable blood sugar, like is shown here. And you can see this is just indicating the body and the brain really wants to stay between a pretty narrow range. And in the literature, that changes all the time in the medical literature, but it's basically somewhere between 80 and 120. And so with 80 being the lower one and 120 being the top one. So if you can keep your blood sugar kind of rolling like this, somewhere in that range, first of all, it doesn't stress your body. You're much calmer, and it's much healthier, which I'll explain to you. So that is the answer. But so the body really wants to operate in that narrow range. The brain and the body need carbs. And so that's one of the things, there's so many programs out there that are cutting out carbs. And your brain and your body need carbs. You need some kind of carbs, but they need to be whole carbs, like coming from whole fruits and whole vegetables, whole grains, quinoa. But also, they need to be balanced with proteins and fats, which is what Clear the Way recommends, because that's what also stabilizes the blood sugar. Carbs are not bad. It really is the kind and the amount that we eat. So I want to just start with that. And I think you know that, being in this program, that you're eating a balanced diet. You don't do away with carbs altogether. But carbs did get a bad rap because simple carbs do spike your blood sugar. For example, typical breakfast, for a conventional American might be to go to Starbucks and get a latte and a muffin, or perhaps juice and cereal, or juice and a bagel. And any one of those breakfasts, what would happen if you ate them is they would spike your blood sugar because of the simple carbs in those meals, which, especially if you were alive and in the 80s and the 90s, when we were in the no-fat, low-fat craze, people would say juice and cereal is perfect because there's no fat. Problem is it's sugar, and it would spike the blood sugar. And you can see how this blood sugar goes right above those normal limits, or the optimal limits. And when the blood sugar spikes that high, the body secretes extra insulin to take care of it, to pull that out of your bloodstream, and ideally to escort that blood sugar to your muscles. But we'll see later that actually gets, that pattern gets interrupted. But in the beginning, it does work that way. So the other thing to notice is that when your blood sugar spikes like that, not only does it secrete excess insulin, but it creates inflammation in your body. So inflammation in the small linings of the capillaries. Inflammation is like, or oxidation, it's like rusting. It's damaging. It's damaging to your cells. And so insulin itself does that, blood sugar does that, being too high. And then what happens if you eat a breakfast like that, because you had all that excess insulin, your blood sugar drops as precipitously as it rose. So now you get this wild ride where you spike the blood sugar, create excess insulin, which stresses the body with inflammation, and then the blood sugar drops below the optimal amount, which creates a new kind of stress, which is too low of a blood sugar. And when it drops low, the body secretes excess cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. Cortisol also creates inflammation. Cortisol does a whole lot of things, which I'll tell you about in a minute. So if you look at the typical day on the standard American diet, this is kind of what happens. Because when the blood sugar drops so low, that's when the cravings really start, is when your blood sugar is low and you have cortisol, because cortisol chemically mediates the cravings for sugar and fat. So there you are. I mean, you had your latte and muffin, say, at 7 a.m., and by 9 already, you're crashed. And, you know, what's most convenient is what you're going to grab. And typically people grab, again, another high glycemic, a donut, a candy bar, a soda. So that's the typical standard American diet, SAD, SAD for short. And we don't want to live like that. This is why diets don't work, because they're short-term solutions for this long-term problem that we've been having. It's why resolutions only last 2 or 3 days, because most people, when they go on a diet, they do something that's severe deprivation, which puts them, if you look back here, it puts them in that low range, puts them down here. And when you're down here, underneath the optimal blood sugar, you're going to have excess cortisol. You very well could even gain weight, even though you're not eating much, because the cortisol will pull on fluids and it's the inflammatory response. And then because you're starving and because you have cortisol and because you just stepped on the scale and you gained a pound, even though you're starving, you say, what the heck, I might as well eat the Oreos. So that's why diets don't work. They don't last very long. Extremes don't work. Balance is the key, which is what Clear the Way is all about. Quick fixes don't work. I just wanted to highlight this thing about cortisol. I've really been noticing a lot lately. I get emails from every kind of diet person. I seem to be on a lot of people's lists, and a lot of them are talking about cortisol, as they should. I mean, cortisol is a real key component to being able to stick with your healthy eating plan. Let me show you so cortisol, I'll just remind you, it's a stress hormone. So you can make excess cortisol just by worrying, just by ruminating, just by thinking about the things that have gone wrong. You start making excess cortisol. You can have excess cortisol when your kid comes home and has a bad report card, or you don't know how to pay your Visa bill, or you've had a fight with your spouse, or you've got a speeding ticket. Cortisol, stress hormone. First comes adrenaline, but adrenaline is followed by cortisol. Cortisol is the one that does this to you. If you have long-term exposure, it will alter your eating patterns. So you'll start having a raging appetite, and you'll look for sugar and fat to refuel with every time. So if you go to a restaurant and they present you with a menu with lots of healthy options on it, where you could get some protein, some chicken or some shrimp or some eggs, and you could get some veggies steamed or even stir-fried, or you could get a pasta dish, you'll go for the pasta dish because you've got cortisol in your system. It impairs immune response, creates changes in body composition. Specifically, excess cortisol tells your body to store all extra calories as fat around the midline. And that's because it's the portal vein in your liver that's the quickest conversion of carbohydrates to energy. So the body thinks, we're in big stress, we better store extra fat right around the middle. Long-term exposure to cortisol leads to mental health issues, specifically being really irritable, snappy. It impairs sleep. You wake up a lot. It certainly increases your risk of heart attack, and it also creates reproductive dysfunction. So we see I've worked for many years in the realm of fertility with Dr. Randine Lewis. And if you ever have any friends or you have issues with fertility, her book, The Infertility Cure, I highly recommend it. She also recommends the kind of protocol that we're doing right here on Clear the Way, because it helps with these blood sugar issues and it supports the body with the right nutrients that are needed in fertility. So cortisol can impair reproduction. and increased risk for metabolic syndrome, which is that conglomerate of syndromes, which is diabetes and fat around the midline, high cholesterol. So cortisol can really be a big factor, and it has to do with stress, but it also has to do with sugar. You can't take the two apart from each other. So let's just do, this is like tiny, tiny chemistry 101. So in your brain and in your intestines, your body makes neuropeptides, neurotransmitters of emotion. We're going to talk specifically about serotonin and endorphins. Serotonin and endorphins would be these little guys here in the middle. These are the packets of communication. They're little communication packets of chemical packets. And these are the sending sites are here. This is the sending, and they go whoop, they go to the receptor sites. And so we have this sending and receiving from the dendrite to the receptor all throughout our body. And I'm sure you know, because you're in this course, that up to 85% of the emotional hormones are produced in your gut, in your intestines. Serotonin produced in your intestines, but also in the brain. And so, so this is what it looks like, just the little communication packets. And I want to talk a little bit about what serotonin does, because this has everything to do with sugar and stress. So when you have when you have low serotonin, you feel depressed, impulsive, short attention span, you feel scattered, blocked, fly off the handle, you feel reactive, you crave sweets, crave mostly carbohydrates like bread, pasta, and candy. That's like most of America, really. We'll say why in a minute. When you have optimal serotonin, that gives you the feeling of being hopeful and optimistic. You're reflective, hopeful, able to concentrate. You're creative, you're focused, you're able to think things out, you're responsive. You enjoy dessert, but you're really hungry for healthy foods. So it's not like you don't like it, but these are the kind of people, they wake up, they're happy, they're ready to greet the day, looking forward to it, they can focus on what they're doing, and when it comes time to eat, they will choose the chicken with the steamed broccoli, and they'll enjoy like a bite of dessert because they enjoy it, but not because they have to have the whole thing. So that's a real key about your serotonin levels. Now, what would cause, we'll talk about in a minute. We'll talk about it in a minute. Beta endorphin. Beta endorphin is the second one. So when we don't have enough beta endorphin produced in our body, we have low pain tolerance, physical and emotional, by the way. We feel tearful and reactive. We have low self-esteem. We get overwhelmed by others' pain. We feel isolated. We feel depressed. We feel hopeless. And we crave sugar. I kind of think of beta endorphin as the self-esteem chemical. We can stand up and feel pretty full and good with ourselves. And I think it's really fascinating that it affects not only emotional pain, but physical pain. When you don't have enough beta endorphin, things that normally wouldn't bother you really bother you. So optimal beta endorphin means that you have a higher pain tolerance. You are sensitive and sympathetic, but not just so reactive. You have high self-esteem, compassionate, connected and in touch with people, you're hopeful and optimistic, and you have a take it or leave it attitude towards sweets. So what would make somebody have low serotonin or low beta endorphin? Well, the answer is stress. Chronic stress or acute stress will impact that. Excuse me. So you see it, an example of it is postpartum depression. When you have a baby, it's a physical stress, it's an emotional stress. And so those stresses oftentimes knock out temporarily beta endorphin and serotonin production. And it makes the new mom feel really blue. The body makes serotonin and beta endorphin. It can come back to its natural state, as many of you have witnessed in people that you may have known or yourselves who have felt postpartum depression. I know I certainly did. And just knowing what it is, realizing this is just a chemical imbalance, not just, it is a chemical imbalance and it can be rectified. A key factor in correcting that is balancing blood sugar. So this is on the left, we're just looking again at this whole concept of the sending cell. You're sending these little neuropeptides of serotonin and beta endorphin, sending them over here to the receiving cell. So let's use this as an example that this person has the normal, I should say optimal really, amount of serotonin or beta endorphin. And this person over here has fewer. They're just, see how there's fewer cells? The fewer cells here producing. So perhaps they've had a big stress and it's been going on for a while. And the longer it goes on, the more it dampens down this production. So they are producing less. When the body produces less, it does something called upregulation, which means it opens more doorways. It opens more receptor sites. The body is so smart. It recognizes that, gosh, there's not enough serotonin and beta endorphin out there. So let's just open up more receptor sites so we can grab whatever we can. So this is how many people walk around upregulated, like they've been stressed, they're not making enough, and they're just, their body's doing the best it can to get some serotonin and beta endorphin. Well, what happens is if you spike your blood sugar, the spike in blood sugar temporarily acts as if it were serotonin and beta endorphin. Temporarily sits on the receptor sites, not temporarily, but it does. It sits on the receptor sites and it acts like serotonin and beta endorphin. So I'm sure if you're sugar sensitive in particular, you know that when you're feeling blue, if you could eat something that would spike your blood sugar, a piece of bread may be your thing, pasta might be your thing, a soda or chocolate. Chocolate's always a favorite for many people, chocolate or ice cream. And when you do, that sugar actually acts like fake beta endorphin and serotonin. So let's take these two people, one with a normal or optimal amount of serotonin and beta endorphin and one with not enough serotonin and a lot of receptor sites. And let's take those two people. They come home after a long day at the office. They're not exactly physically hungry. They had a late lunch. They're not physically hungry, but they're really stressed. And when they walk in, they see a plate of chocolate chip cookies. The person who has optimal serotonin will look at the cookies and say, oh man, those smell good. I mean, look at that chocolate just melting right outside there. That looks really good. I can't wait to have one for dessert. But this person on the right walks in, and because they don't have enough serotonin and beta endorphin, they're craving it. They can't help but eat those cookies. And when they eat a cookie, that sugar hits on every single one of these receptor sites. Boom, 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 boom. And they get high. Like, oh, and before they know it, the whole plate is gone. They haven't even tasted anything past the first cookie. It sends them, it's a chemical response. So if you've ever had that kind of response to a high glycemic food, like a cookie or like bread, sweet rolls, a pasta, then probably you were in this situation where you were in upregulation. You had been for some reason stressed and you had suppressed your own serotonin and beta endorphin, and it set you up. Now, so what happens next? Well, what happens next, so here's our normal, optimal person over here. What happens next is the person who had been low all of a sudden starts eating a whole lot of foods that have sugars in them. They don't have to be sweet, remember, they just have to spike your blood sugar. So it could be any of the processed foods. And they're hitting, you see all these little neurotransmitters, they're getting it all the time. Basically, they're just self-medicating from morning until night. They're choosing the things that will give them just a little hit, just a little hit. And as they do that, the body says, whoa, we're getting bombarded. And look, it closes some doors. You see that? So some of the doors close. And now, because there are fewer doors, it takes more of the same substance to have the effect that it used to. Sound familiar? It's the addiction cycle. So simple carbohydrates, anything that like candies, cookies, chocolates, chips, pastas, they actually follow the same chemical addiction process that heroin, cocaine, alcohol have. The same thing, because now you need more. And I think that's why in our country, everything's bigger. We've supersized. And look, in 1990, which to me doesn't seem that long ago, to some of y'all it does, but just in 1990, the candy bars being sold were all 2.1 ounces, but now they're 5 ounces. It's more than twice as big. And that's because the whole country went through this. You can see how a country that's been in hypervigilance, particularly if you look at 9/11, the entire country went in hypervigilance, which means we dampened down the country. We all did this. When there's stress for a long period of time, we stop producing enough serotonin and beta endorphin. Then the whole country, especially after the low fat craze, we just start self-medicating with what we consider health foods, like pretzels. That's healthy, right? Not. Bagels, that's healthy, right? Not. So we start self-medicating, not realizing it. We think we feel better, but it's temporary. And not only is it temporary, but after we do it for a while, we downregulate and we need more of the same thing, which is how we got to where we are now. Can you see how that might have happened to you or people that you know? I see it in myself. I see it in so many people getting stuck in this roller coaster. So what we need to look at is taking out the 5 big stress foods, the things that stress us. Because remember, when you're stressed, that's going to set you up for craving things that spike your blood sugar. And the top 5 stress foods are refined sugar, refined flours, artificial sweeteners, caffeine, and processed kind of anything, but especially processed meats with nitrites in them. So these are the top 5. There are others, and we all have individual nutritional makeup. We have different chemistries. So for some of you, a stress food might even be dairy, might be alcohol. I would say alcohol actually could be on this list too, but it's not as common, to be honest. These are the really common ones. So you want to take out these top 5 stress foods. And if we haven't convinced you before in this course and anywhere, artificial sweeteners, no. They're so stressful to your body in so many ways. I won't go into it. I'm just going to say no. If you want a low glycemic sweetener, you could use stevia. I'm okay with xylitol that's in gum, chewing gum with xylitol. It's actually good for your teeth. There's a new no glycemic hit sweeteners, no calorie sweetener made from a fruit, the monk fruit, and it's called Lakanto, Lakanto, Lakanto. So those sweeteners you could use, but not the things in the packets, not aspartame, not Splenda, NutraSweet, that stuff. Okay. So, and just a reminder, I know you already know this from the recipes you have for Clear the Way, but what we're doing is we want to move toward complex. So from the most simple, from the alcohol to the simple sugars, to white things, packaged crackers and breads and pastas, to things with color. Pretty much things with color, except for M&Ms. And not white things except for cauliflower. That one's okay. Those are the exceptions. So that's the direction that you want to head in terms of what kind of carbs that you're going to pick. So how do you boost serotonin when it's been dampened down? Basically, and endorphins too. Most of these will boost both. How do you do that? Because your body does make it, but if you've been stressed and you recognize yourself in this pattern, you need some strategies. So here are the top ways to boost your own serotonin. So sunlight. I know those of you, you may do the Clear the Way protocol at different times in the year. So in the summertime, it's easier for most of us because there's sunlight. In the wintertime, especially if you live in a far northern area, you might need to get full spectrum lights because that helps a lot with serotonin production. Exercise you enjoy. You notice I say you enjoy. I really don't think that exercising on a treadmill, if you hate it, does as much for serotonin production. So find something you enjoy, and hopefully you've enjoyed some of the yoga already and the hoop dancing. If you haven't tried any of it, you'll see hoop dancing coming up. You'll get some different ways to experience, but dance and walk in nature, go with friends, try new things. Yoga clearly helps with serotonin production. It's actually designed, the way the sequences are designed help stimulate sympathetic and then parasympathetic nervous system and balance them, and this helps with serotonin production. Guided imagery. My favorite guided imagery is Belarus Naparstek, Naparstek, Naparstek. Her website is healthjourneys.com. And oh my goodness, she has so many guided imagery CDs. And one of the things I love a lot about her, I love her voice. I also love the fact that she has hardcore science backing up all of her guided imagery. So guided imagery, friendship, that boosts your serotonin, just calling a friend. Stimulating your senses. So really think about taste, touch, smell. And I know you've already been considering increasing pleasure, because we talk about that a lot. And this is where this comes in. Increasing pleasures through your senses helps boost serotonin. Massage and aromatherapy. And then in terms of food, what you need to eat, a protein and complex carbohydrates, in order to give your body the raw materials it needs to make serotonin. You need to have full cycle of sleep, because serotonin is produced when you need darkness. So you have melatonin is the same kind of chemical process as serotonin, and you need a full cycle of sleep. You also need proper cellular nutrition, which you are getting. That AM and PM packet gives your cells the necessary ingredients also. It needs more than just protein and complex. It needs all of the micronutrients that you have in your antioxidants and your minerals to boost serotonin. So the summary is, when you want to break this sugar stress cycle, you've got to have smart nutrition, which you've got. That will break it. You need supplements, which you've got. That's help giving your body what it needs. You need relaxation, because every time you're stressed, it creates cortisol, and the cortisol makes you go towards sugars. So that, don't discount the relaxation. Remember, in prep week, you have Martine Rudy's restorative yoga, the audio. Go back and do that. And if you find yourself eating under stress, pull out that CD or the MP3 and you relax yourself and see how your cravings go away. Clearly, exercise helps, and seek support. So we have the forum, the Facebook forum. If you're struggling, go on there and talk to people, because everyone in this group has gone through the same thing. And seeking support is one other way to boost your serotonin. So I hope this is helpful. For me, it was really helpful to learn this information. I want to give credit to Kathleen Desmaisons. Her last name is Desmaisons. Her original book is called Potatoes Not Prozac. Potatoes Not Prozac. Her website is radiantrecovery.com. And Kathleen is the one that did the original science, showing us this connection between stress and sugar. Brilliant. She's a brilliant scientist. And first time I learned this, I felt so much more self-compassion. I thought, up until then, I thought, oh my gosh, it's just lack of willpower. It's not lack of willpower, it's chemistry. And you've got to know how to change your chemistry so you're not always fighting yourself. So I hope that was helpful to you, and we'll see you in the next weeks.